What's up, guys? It's Dan from Coin Bureau Trading. Today's video is the fourth in a four-part series about how to trade crypto for beginners. Today, we're going to be taking a look at a few technical indicators. If this is the kind of content that you enjoy, then be sure to smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, and ping that notification bell so you don't miss the next one. So with that being said, guys, I'm just going to start off with a nice little picture here of all these different indicators. And I guess I'll start by saying one thing that I think is really important and that a lot of people miss. Unless you're a super advanced trader, you don't really need all of these indicators. And not only that, but you can think of these indicators as being like similarly to the trend lines. It's like a different way of looking at the same thing, if that makes any sense. And in some cases, yes, it'll give you a better view, but in most cases, not necessarily. In most cases, just having support and resistance and trend lines is more than enough. But that being said, indicators are something I use personally, but I do keep things very, very simple. I only use like 2 or 3 indicators. So those are the ones that I'll be showing you guys today, because I honestly don't think, again, this is for beginners. I honestly think you don't need more than a few, and I'll show you exactly how to use them, how to put them on, and all that type of stuff. So we'll start here with Bitcoin. We're on the daily. We're on Binance here, and what I've done is, like when you go to Binance, like you have the original view and then you have the trading view. So I go to the trading view here, and then if you go up here, you'll see there's a little button that says technical indicator, and the first one we're going to look at, well, you click on that, and then you just search for Bollinger Bands, and you just pick the first one, and you don't need to do anything. You don't need to adjust any settings or anything like that. The Bollinger Bands, in my opinion, are the most useful and the easiest on any time frame. Whether you're going down to the 4-hour or the daily or the weekly or the monthly, zooming out all the way to the monthly. The Bollinger Band moving average, I think, is really helpful, and of course we'll start just zooming out from the monthly just to explain why. So as you guys can see, like the Bollinger Band moving average has been a very key zone, or I guess a very important zone, a very important level that Bitcoin's kind of respected throughout this whole bull market. And you could say that if Bitcoin is above the Bollinger Band moving average on the monthly, then it's in a bull market. If it's below, then it's in a bear market. It's like a very nice line that tells you like, oh, I can see, like very clearly this was the bear market, that was the previous bull market, this is the current bull market, right? And so long as Bitcoin is above this level, then Bitcoin is in a bull market. At least that's the way that I see it, and I mean, because that's what it looks like historically, right? And then zooming into the weekly, we can see like, okay, well, right now Bitcoin is below the Bollinger Band moving average on the weekly, and we can see that's something that tends to happen when there's like a short-term correction, like what we saw over last summer. We saw a temporary fall below the Bollinger Band moving average, or just like chopping around there on the weekly, sorry, for Bitcoin. And if we go back in time here, guys, we can see that something similar actually happened in the previous cycle, where you saw Bitcoin fall below the Bollinger Band moving average for about 2 months with that May crash, you might remember, from the China flood of like China banning crypto and stuff like that. So again, this Bollinger Band moving average is kind of like more of like a medium term, let's say. If Bitcoin's below that, then it's like in a medium term bearish trend. If it's above that, then it's in a medium term bullish trend. And unfortunately, it does look like we're heading into like a medium term bearish trend here. At the time of shooting, it's still a bit too soon to say. If Bitcoin was to close somewhere, closer to this line, then it might be fine. And even then, the next week could be like a very big green week, and it could take us back above this level and kind of confirm that we're still in a medium-term bullish trend, if that makes any sense, at least for Bitcoin. And the key thing with the Bollinger Band moving average, here zooming into the daily, you can see that recently here that Bitcoin has had a very hard time getting above this level over the last few days here. And I'm filming this, of course, in early March. So you can see that ever since Bitcoin started crashing, kind of like after the Trump inauguration, well, there was a little bit of a test of this Bollinger Band moving average. This is on the daily again. And then, but ever since that time, it's struggled to get back above. And every single time it gets to that level, it gets rejected and it keeps falling, which is, again, it's very useful. And again, if you're just doing the support resistance, you'll find similar levels. But again, similarly to the trend lines, if you're looking at the price action, you're like, I don't really understand what's going on here, throwing on the Bollinger Band can really help put things into perspective and understand even like the range within which prices could basically chop. Like these outer bands here, like even though I do focus a lot on the moving average, these outer bands really do help you get a sense of like, okay, when we're outside of these bands, then it's probably oversold, to the bottom. But if we're outside of the bands to the top, then it's probably overbought. So that's potentially a good time to take some profits. And you can see this is consistent across multiple time frames, whether it's the weekly or the daily or the monthly or anything, right? So this is very useful. It's, in my opinion, it's basically the only indicator that you need. I will show you a couple of others, but the last thing I will say with the Bollinger Band moving average, the way that I use it personally is that I will basically start from, let's say, like the 4 hour, and I'll say, okay, like, is Bitcoin above the Bollinger Band? And this applies for any crypto, by the way. You can do this with most, especially larger altcoins. With larger altcoins and Bitcoin, this works very well. Some smaller altcoins, especially if you're dealing with like super small caps and meme coins and micro caps, not necessarily as much, which is why I don't necessarily rely on these on the Bollinger Bands that much on those smaller ones. But what I will do with Bitcoin and the larger ones is I look and I ask, I say, okay, is Bitcoin above the Bollinger Band moving average on the 4 hour? If no, then this is the first level to watch. So we can say, okay, first thing that we need to watch is for Bitcoin to get above this, let's say 88K, right? Once it gets above 88K, what's the next level to watch? And so we go to the daily and we say, okay, we can see that there's a Bollinger Band moving average here at 90K. So that would be the next stop, right? If it gets above 88K, then 90K will probably be the next stop according to the Bollinger Band moving average on the daily. So let's say Bitcoin gets to 90K. What's the next stop? We zoom out to the monthly and we can say, okay, the Bollinger Band moving average is currently somewhere around 93K, right? So it's like, this is kind of like the way to see when prices are below Bollinger Band moving average on a shorter term time frame, that it kind of creates like the stepping stones, right? That will tell you whether a recovery is in progress or not. And we could use the same thing in the opposite case, right? Where if Bitcoin is above the Bollinger Band moving, or I guess to like imagine that prices keep dropping in this case, we can use it the opposite way and say, okay, so Bitcoin at the time of shooting, Bitcoin is struggling to basically fall to keep above the Bollinger Band moving average on the weekly. So what's the lowest it could possibly fall to? I'm not saying it's going to, but it's for me just to understand what's the lowest it could fall to would be the Bollinger Band moving average on the monthly, somewhere around 65K. And it's worth remembering though, guys, is that these levels do change like with every single day, every single week, especially on the longer term time frames. Like even though right now it's around 64K or whatever, in about a month's time, it could be up closer to 70K, right? So that's something also to keep in mind, is that these levels do change, because like before here, it was 93K on the Bollinger Band moving average on the daily, and now it's 90K. It's something that changes along with the most recent price action, which is why I think that these Bollinger Bands are so useful. It's very dynamic, let's say, like whereas these like support and resistance and trend lines, it's very static. Like it's like, you know, you draw the line and that's the line. These lines actually change kind of like in real time with the price action, which is what makes them so useful, I think. But anyways, guys, yeah. So this is the first indicator, and we can remove it here. You'd basically just hover just below where you see the ticker. You just go here and you just click the X, and that'll remove the indicator. Now we search for the next one, which of course we can look at the relative strength index, or RSI. I know that this is one that Aaron is a huge fan of. It's not one that I use very much personally, for the simple reason that when something is overbought, it can stay overbought. When something is oversold, it can stay oversold. And I found in my personal experience that it's almost better to use like RSI on something like this, like stocks, to get a sense of whether crypto is overbought or oversold. Like if crypto is showing that it's super overbought, for example, but stocks are not, then that tells me that that crypto could keep going higher, if that makes any sense, because there's a strong correlation between the two. Now this is something I could actually ramble about for a long time, but point being is that, again, like I personally don't use this very often, for the simple reason that what's overbought can stay overbought, especially if it looks from like the perspective of other assets, that it could keep heading higher. If other assets could keep heading higher, then chances are crypto will too. But similarly, if we see something is super oversold and it looks like stocks are going to continue heading lower, like there's still, you know, stocks are somewhere in the middle, let's say in the RSI range, and that tells me that if stocks keep heading lower, then obviously the RSI could become even more oversold in the case of crypto. I hope that makes sense. I know it's a little, this is like where things get a little bit more advanced, and it's part of why I don't use these indicators. It's like it requires a little bit more work to understand what's going on, whereas with the Bollinger Band, you can just slap it on and you know, and that's it. But with that being said, I do want to bring up the RSI, especially when it comes to Ethereum specifically. So we'll actually add it here to Ethereum. Just search for RSI and you know, it's the first option there. You can see that with Ethereum, especially when we zoom out to longer time frames, that Ethereum is really like, is just so extremely oversold. I mean, I guess not, it could still go a little bit lower, of course, but it's at levels that are, you know, it's levels that it has not seen basically since it completely collapsed back in the summer of 2022. And of course, you know, again, like it doesn't mean that it's over, it could still keep going, you know, lower and lower. But the thing is that this indicator tells me and tells us, especially on the longer term time frames, which is where I prefer to use the RSI. Like you go into the longer term and you're like, man, like this looks like really, really low. Like surely it's going to bounce at some point. It's going to bounce from this level, like from this range, right? The same way you would look at like support and resistance, right, on the price action. You can do the same thing with the RSI, which basically, I guess it was if it wasn't clear enough, the RSI kind of tells you like the momentum and the strength of the asset, right? So if RSI is going down, obviously that tends to correspond to price action, but you can also see like these divergences, like for example that that Ethereum's price is still rallying, but the strength of that rally is diminishing per the RSI. That tells you that there's a divergence there, which can lead to a correction as we saw here. So basically, price is up, RSI down. That's a divergence. It's called a bearish divergence, and that suggests that prices will be going lower. And again, like this is stuff that's great to know, very useful. But again, I bet, and I'll actually, I actually didn't check this before, so we're going to find out. But I bet if I was to go here to the Bollinger Bands, yep, you go to the Bollinger Bands and you can say, yeah, so long as, every single time there was a break above this Bollinger Band, that would have been kind of like a signal to take profit. So without having to look at the RSI, we would have known that also with the Bollinger Band, which of course, again, you could say it's not as perfect and it's maybe better to use them in conjunction, which I would agree. But again, if you're someone who's a complete beginner, and you're like looking for all these divergences and stuff, it's probably a little bit trickier. Something more if you're more like an intermediate trader, if that makes any sense. But the last thing I do want to highlight, here we'll get rid of the indicator here. So the last thing I do want to highlight is the MACD, which is the moving average convergence divergence. And this is similar to, I guess you could say it's similar to the RSI, but it's more like telling you, is this crypto in a bullish trend or bearish trend, if that makes any sense. So I guess in that case, is maybe a little bit more similar to the Bollinger Band moving average. But what this basically tells you, what these bars basically tell you, is like, is this crypto in a bullish phase or a bearish phase? When the bars are green, obviously it's a bullish phase, and when bars are red, it's in a bearish phase. And when these two moving averages here, when they converge, when they flip, when they basically cross when those lines cross, then the trend also changes. So you can see here that the lines are about to cross. So hopefully that'll result in like, in the next couple of days here for Ethereum, that it'll get back into a bullish zone. Is that bullish zone necessarily going to translate to a huge rally? As we can see here, not necessarily, which is part of why, again, I'm not too much of a fan of like these indicators like MACD. Like, yeah, it's going to help me out, but it might not necessarily, it doesn't reflect as well in the price action as something like the Bollinger Band moving average, if that makes sense. It doesn't reflect it as accurately, in my opinion. But again, it's something that's still useful to have, useful to check when you've really like checked everything that you can, and you're really like thinking like, man, like, I tried the or I tried doing the support and resistance, I tried doing the trend line, I tried doing like the Bollinger Band, the Bollinger Bands, and I still can't get a sense of what's going on with the price action. Then using stuff like the RSI and then the MACD, I think makes sense to like to really try and see is like, okay, what is going on here? What can I expect here? It looks like here, of course, Ethereum is still in this kind of like in a bearish phase here on the weekly, and I suspect it's going to look something similar on the monthly. Yeah, and so that's the thing is, it's very interesting. And even something like looking on the monthly, you say, okay, it's in a bearish trend, but like, is the bearish trend really that strong? What does that really mean? Could we see then another, like 4 or 5 months of like Ethereum collapsing? I mean, maybe, but again, it's like, this is not, these indicators like the MACD is not going to help you as much with that, which is why I prefer going and just like slapping on, like Bollinger Bands, and just sticking to those. And I guess the last thing, actually, before I forget, I'll slap on the Bollinger Bands here again. The one thing that is also, I should have mentioned a little bit earlier with the Bollinger Bands, is that there's something called the Bollinger Band squeeze. So basically, when prices have been chopping sideways for a long time, then this creates like a squeezing, and then either you're going to see squeeze to the downside or squeeze to the upside. And I think I was supposed to film a video with Aaron, and we were like doing some practice run for it basically. And Aaron was bullish because of RSI on Bitcoin. This was a couple weeks ago. He was super bullish on RSI on Bitcoin because of the RSI, and I was super bullish on Bitcoin because I could see it was squeezing and it looked like it was going to break above, and of course it did squeeze below, unfortunately, because of this like tariff FUD and whatever else. But when you see these squeezes, you can even see it back here. Sometimes it's tricky to see, but occasionally it's like, prices when they just chop, when they've just been chopping in a range, especially when they're around the Bollinger Band moving average, it means that there's going to be a big move to the upside or the downside. And that's something, a really nice thing, if someone who's, wants to prepare yourself psychologically for volatility, that's definitely an indicator that helps out a lot on that front. But yeah, guys, I mean, that's kind of it for the indicators. I think with those three, again, for a beginner, I think that's more than enough. You don't really need any, extreme, like all this crazy stuff that you see other people using. If you're more intermediate, advanced, if you're really trying to learn and become a better trader, like this, the traders that Aaron is teaching, then definitely, yeah, like, feel free to experiment and use all these different indicators like VPVR or whatever, and all these different ones, right? Or like a Fibonacci retracements and all that type of stuff. But again, for me personally, I just personally stick to the Bollinger Bands. I occasionally throw on the RSI, but almost every time I just stick to the Bollinger Bands. Again, as another way of giving me more insight in addition to support, resistance, and trend lines. With support, resistance, trend lines, and Bollinger Bands, like with those three things together, especially if you practice, that should be enough to give you a sense of what's going on, regardless of the time frame, and that should help you a lot in your trading strategy, which makes it a good fourth video and concluding video to this little mini tutorial. And and do let me know if you want me to do more of these tutorials in the future. Then drop a comment down below and let me know what you think I should cover, and I'll be happy to do that. But again, this tutorial, this series was specifically for beginners, so don't go complaining saying, "Hey, you didn't, explain like some crazy like rainbow waves or whatever." Right? That's not what this is about. It's just very simple: support, resistance, trend lines, and the Bollinger Bands, and plus, a couple other technical indicators. So yeah, guys, before I forget, I do need to, of course, show the Coin Bureau deals page. We were using Binance just now. We have a 20% trading fee discount and up to $600 in bonuses. These trading fee discounts will help out a lot. Even if you're not trading with a lot of money, if you're trading frequently, those fees do add up. I know that from experience. So take advantage of these deals. They're completely free. The exchange gets a new user. We get a cut of the trading fee, and you get a trading fee discount for life. It's a win-win-win for everyone, and it'll help you out a lot. And you might as well take advantage of these deals. And we don't just have them on Binance, but other exchanges. Take advantage of these deals. It doesn't hurt. Just takes literally like 30 seconds to sign up. Helps us out a lot, helps you out a lot. And again, it's a win-win-win. But anyways, guys, if you did make it this far, then be sure to smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, ping that notification bell, and I'll see you in the next one.